As Prime Minister Modi hosted India's first SCO Summit, differences with China and Pakistan came to the fore, as well as the discomfort with the anti-Western rhetoric. Was the summit a missed opportunity or simply a sign of the times? Hello and welcome to Worldview at the Hindu with me, Suhasini Haidar. Now, last year, around this time, Worldview had come to you from Samarkand and a grand summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or the SCO there, with Presidents Putin, Xi, Prime Minister Sharif, Central Asian leaders, including the host Uzbekistan's President Mirziyoyev and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This year, the comparison was stark as India hosted its first SCO Summit, had all those leaders there, but online, even as Prime Minister Modi praised the relevance of the grouping. Listen in.
SCO पूरे एशियाई क्षेत्र में शांति, समृद्धि और विकास के लिए एक महत्वपूर्ण प्लेटफॉर्म के रूप में उभरा है। इस क्षेत्र के साथ भारत के हजारों वर्ष पुराने सांस्कृतिक और पीपल टू पीपल संबंध हमारी साझा विरासत का जीवंत प्रमाण है। हम इस क्षेत्र को एक्सटेंडेड नेबरहुड ही नहीं, एक्सटेंडेड फैमिली की तरह देखते हैं।
Now, for those just joining, the SCO is a grouping of Eurasian powers, originally Russia, China, 4 Central Asian countries, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, that was started in 2001. It came out of what was called the Shanghai Five. India and Pakistan were inducted, the first such inductions, in 2017. So the question, why was this summit important at all? Are these countries relevant to India's foreign policy future? Or is the organization itself in some way relevant? To begin with, this was the first time India hosted the SCO Summit. It took over as chair last year. It held over that period 134 meetings, many of them virtual, including 15 ministerial meetings. Remember, as I said, India had joined the SCO in 2005 as an observer. It only became a member in 2017. This was the 23rd SCO Summit. Now, this was also an important summit because Iran was inducted as a full member. This is important for India as it is through Iran that India's connectivity plans for the region lie through Chabahar in particular, as well as the international North-South transport corridor. We've spoken about this before. In addition, there were some countries that were brought in as dialogue partners of the SCO: Kuwait, Maldives, Myanmar, the UAE, all countries with strong ties with India. Thirdly, at a time that the Modi government is really at an impasse over forging a joint statement for the G20, the SCO Delhi Declaration that was passed without similar troubles because Ukraine was not mentioned in the joint statement was a success for Delhi at this time. For India, which has made fighting terrorism a cornerstone of its foreign policy, the grouping has a focus on terror issues, and this year particularly on new age terror mechanisms like the use of social media, terror financing, drone technology, etc. The SCO leaders actually signed a joint statement on countering radicalization leading to terrorism, separatism and extremism, which all the countries, including Pakistan, signed on to. Fifth, this is the second SCO summit, remember, since the Ukraine conflict began. And while clearly there was no criticism of Russia in the statement, the joint statement did speak about finding ways around the sanctions against Russia. And they condemned sanctions that were unilateral in the statement. Leaders spoke in favor of implementing, quote, a roadmap for the gradual increase in the share of national currencies in mutual settlements by the interested member states. So India did not sign on to what was called the Economic Cooperation Roadmap for many reasons. But of course, India has been using currencies other than the dollar to pay for Russian oil, including rupees, dirhams, and even the Chinese yuan. Now, speaking at the summit, this was said most starkly by Iran President Ibrahim Raisi, who said, quote, any attempt to shape an international system requires the removal of this instrument of dominance, what he called the dollar, in intra-regional relations. So the rhetoric really quite heated there. Sixth, The joint statement also referred to Afghanistan, for which the SCO maintains a special contact group. For India, which has joined other SCO countries in opening its mission or reopening its mission in Kabul despite the Taliban being in power, it is significant that the statement spoke of curbing terror, drugs in the country, bringing an inclusive government in. What was missing, of course, was there was no mention of the rights of women or girls' education in the statement. That's more seen perhaps in Western-driven statements. Seventh, in addition, the SCO issued a joint statement on digital transformation. This has been a key objective of the Modi government. It's spoken about the need for using digital payments. India really sees itself as a path bearer, if you like, in this. So given what seems to be a substantive agenda, where did all those problems lie? And did those problems actually overshadow India's SCO chairmanship? To begin with, of course, India's bilateral differences with China and Pakistan underpinned many of the problems with the summit. First, India's opposition to China's Belt and Road Initiative. Of course, that dates back several years because of the Belt and Road, including projects in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And this was also recorded in the joint statements. It's been recorded over the years that India stays out of the paragraphs that pertain to the Belt and Road Initiative. In fact, Prime Minister Modi also referred to this in his speech.
किसी भी क्षेत्र की प्रगति के लिए मजबूत कनेक्टिविटी का होना बहुत ही आवश्यक है। बेहतर कनेक्टिविटी आपसी व्यापार ही नहीं, आपसी विश्वास भी बढ़ाती है। किंतु इन प्रयासों में एससीओ चार्टर के मूल सिद्धांतों, विशेष रूप से सदस्य देशों की संप्रभुता और क्षेत्रीय अखंडता का सम्मान करना बहुत ही आवश्यक है।
Second, he also referred to the double standards on terrorism. There was a reference to China's blocking Indian attempts to add terrorist names to the UN Security Council's designation lists, including the most recent block that China put on 26/11 attacks handler Sajid Mir. But he also spoke directly about the problem of cross-border terrorism, and that is a reference to Pakistan. Here's what he said and the response from Pakistan Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif.
कुछ देश क्रॉस बॉर्डर टेररिज्म को अपनी नीतियों के इंस्ट्रूमेंट के रूप में इस्तेमाल करते हैं, आतंकवादियों को पनाह देते हैं। एससीओ को ऐसे देशों की आलोचना में कोई संकोच नहीं करना चाहिए। ऐसे गंभीर विषय पर दोहरे मापदंड के लिए कोई स्थान नहीं होना चाहिए।
The hydra-headed monster of terrorism and extremism, whether committed by individuals, societies, or states, must be fought with full vigor and conviction. Any temptation to use it as a cudgel for diplomatic point scoring must be avoided under all circumstances. Terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, including state terrorism, must be condemned in clear and unambiguous terms. There can be no justification for the killing of innocent people, regardless of the cause or pretext. Similarly, religious minorities should never be demonized in the pursuit of domestic political agendas.
So much point scoring there, although remember that bilateral issues are not actually brought up directly at the SCO. Third, and this was the big problem, India was isolated over an agreement for an economic cooperation roadmap 2030 that was agreed to by all the other SCO members. It's still unclear exactly what India objected to in the draft text, originally I think circulated by Tajikistan. There were references to the BRI perhaps, a Chinese imprint, or whether it was the de-dollarization plan. But India for the moment has not signed on to this agreement, whereas the other countries actually have. A fourth big problem, Indian proposals for making English a formal language at the SCO, which would really make it more representative of the membership, because before that it was either Chinese, Mandarin or Russian. But they also objected to Indian initiatives on things like millets, on lifestyle for environment, which are Prime Minister Modi's pet projects. Apparently, these were blocked by China. Fifth problem, the timing of the SCO summit. It came in between Prime Minister Modi's visit to Washington in June and then to Paris next week in July. This clearly led to some discomfort given the anti-Western slant of the grouping as a whole, especially with the induction of Iran, proposed membership of Belarus next year, both countries really sanctioned by the West. This becomes a tougher tightrope walk for India. And lastly, because of all these reasons perhaps, or some of them, including the optics of hosting President Putin during the war, the problems with China at the LAC, with Pakistan in general, the government actually decided just to cancel its plans for the in-person summit and hold instead a single session virtual meet. This decision disappointed in particular the Central Asian countries that had already confirmed their participation. Remember, the India-Central Asia meet for Republic Day last year also had to be cancelled, that time due to COVID. The online summit meant Prime Minister Modi also missed an opportunity to speak to Russian and Chinese leaders about the G20 summit communique and the impasse there. And this is just ahead of the Sherpa meeting next week in Hampi, which is meant to finalize the draft. It's the last meeting of the G20 Sherpas before the summit itself. Given the obvious discomforts and the disunity that seemed to come out at the SCO summit, many are already asking, is India's membership even warranted? This is just 6 years after India actually joined. So let's take a look at why the SCO remains important for India. In an increasingly polarized world, the SCO membership allows India to keep its balance, strategic autonomy, and place in a non-Western part of the world without needing to pledge allegiance in any way. The second reason the SCO countries represent, and I can give you a whole list, but it's 42% of the world's population, 24% of its GDP, 20% of global oil, 44% of its natural resources, a sizable chunk of world food production, connectivity for future trade, markets, all the rest. The SCO membership cannot be underestimated. Third, the SCO began as a conflict resolution stability grouping. Now it really increasingly looks at connectivity. Remember, both of these are key concerns for India. It is also one of the rare regional groupings that India is a part of, given that it has walked out, or at least has not agreed to attend any SAARC summits, the South Asian grouping, and it has walked out of the RCEP, that economic FTA for ASEAN countries, China, Australia, New Zealand, and others. Fourth, the link to Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, other Central Asian countries is increasingly important, both as a market and as a resource base. The SCO allows India to be part of that alternative economic structure in the world, especially as sanctions on Russia and Iran make it difficult to do normal trade with them, as India has seen over the last few years. In fact, more on this is going to be seen at the BRICS summit next month in South Africa. Many of the countries looking for something like a BRICS payment mechanism that will create its own economic world order, if you like. So what is the Worldview take on what has happened with the SCO summit this week? Having done the hard work and accepted all the risks of non-alignment for decades, India stands in a stronger position today. I think that's unarguable as a balancing power and one whose demand for strategic autonomy is respected by all. Countries are willing to work with India despite that position. To give up or undermine its SCO presence is to give up a foothold in an important part of the world that is right at India's own borders. India's hosting of the SCO summit therefore lost the opportunity to assert its leadership in the grouping. And the discomfort with the SCO's anti-Western slant, it's pejoratively called the Association of Autocrats, this is simply a sign of the times that India has to learn to navigate. Now let's get you some Worldview recommendations and book recommendations for you. And remember, this is a difficult subject. Not too much has been written about the SCO itself. But I'll get you some books that will give you enough background on why it's important to India. To begin with, this book is a must-read. If you haven't read it, you must already, called India and Central Asia, The Strategic Dimension by P. Stobdan. It's a recent book. The second, not so well known and actually a little more difficult to read, is Unlocking India's Strategic Potential in Central Asia. This is by Roman Mazulevsky. Then a couple of compendiums of essays. There's India's Foreign Policy in the Post-COVID World. This is edited by Ambassador Narendra Kumar. There's a chapter on India and Central Asia by former Ambassador to Uzbekistan, Vinod Kumar. That's a must-read, plus chapters on India's ties with China, Russia and Iran. Another compendium, Modi Shaping a Global Order in Flux, by Sujan Chinoy and Vijay Chauthaiwale. Clearly one is the head of the IDSA, the other the BJP's foreign cell. So it does have that political it's very pro-government. But there are very many interesting chapters in it, talks about really from a government point of view, what are the important relations for India. And don't miss this chapter on India-Russia ties by former Ambassador to Moscow, D.B. Venkatesh Verma. Then another set of essays, really, the Sino-Indian Rivalry, Implications for Global Order, edited by Sumit Ganguly. This is a very recent book and I urge you to read it. A book a little further ago written called Belt and Road, A Chinese World Order by Bruno Massais, but it has been very percipient. It's really looked into the future there. Another book more on economic stuff, China's Belt and Road Initiative and its international consequences by Azad Barnett. Difficult to find and difficult to read actually. Also India in the era of China's Belt and Road Initiative, a Modi response to Xi by Anil Sigdel. Clearly a very, very focused book. And then I have two books which really are favorites of mine. They stay on my bookshelf. I refer to them when possible, and I think you might find them interesting in just molding your thought about the idea, does geography always outpost history, or is it the other way around? One is called The Revenge of Geography. I've spoken about it before. What the map tells us about the coming conflicts and the battle against fate. This is by Robert E. Kaplan, and of course I've spoken about some of his other books, including Monsoon before. And another really interesting book called The Rise and Fall of the Great Powers by Paul Kennedy. It looks at the big powers in the world today, but doesn't just give them the immediate situation, but looks at them over a number of centuries. So we hope you enjoy reading all of these, and we hope you enjoy Worldview. Do subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, on The Hindu's YouTube channel, or subscribe to our website, www.thehindu.com. From the team here, do join us again, and thanks for watching.